Hi, I'm Brendan Hassan from Speak to Perfection. The top 5 benefits to teaching privately. There's more satisfaction on your part. You can create a flexible schedule. You'll have more steady income from each student. You get to choose the best materials and use a method that works wonders. There are many English teachers who'd love to break out of the school setting and start teaching on their own. Many do, and many more don't. I personally decided to do it in 1988 and never looked back. The rewards way outweigh the alternative. Here, I'd like to share with you the top 5 benefits of why you should think about teaching privately. This is from my own experience, and I realize that it's not for everyone. Number 1, when you decide to work for yourself, something about your teaching changes. You are now heavily invested in each lesson, much more so than when working for someone else. You have decided the materials to use. And if it's not a good fit, you will know that and feel as if you have let your student down. The same goes for the method you choose to use to teach. More on that later. When you get it right, you have this feeling of investment, and you will feel an emotional reward for the time you have taken to get the best materials for your student. Number 2, one of the best reasons in going out on your own is the ability to choose when you teach. When I was teaching in Milan, I scheduled my first lessons around 7 in the morning. I say around 7 because Italians are notoriously late, never on time. This is not a slight on Italians, but a simple fact. And they actually brag about it. See you in the morning at 7, they'd say with a slight grin, knowing it's going to be more around 7:20. That was fine with me since the clock started at 7, not when they arrived. That's another benefit I'll address another time. I'd work till lunchtime, go home and make something to eat, then catch a nap and start again around 4, finishing up somewhere between 8 and 9 in the evening. Fridays were my special days. I wouldn't schedule lessons in the afternoon or evenings. Instead, I'd go to the cinema that played films in their original language and then meet friends for a pint at an Irish pub. Freedom comes in many forms. This was one of the ways of saying you're doing a good job for your students and you deserve a break. Perhaps one of the major reasons teachers like to work for themselves is the fact that you can make so much more money doing so. I went from making $1,500 to $1,800 a month working for Berlitz in Milan to much more working for myself. In order to make that kind of money with a language school, I had to work 50 hours or so, not including travel time, which was a pain in the butt. I had to use public transportation that was not the fastest way to get around the city. But once I got my first few clients, I was making 4 to 5 times that. That allowed me to buy a scooter, and that scooter allowed me to get from point A to point B the quickest. Not only did I save travel time between lessons, I could schedule more appointments with prospective clients. That meant more cash flow, since I always got paid in advance. More on that in another article. I constantly made close to $100,000 a year, working 9 to 10 months out of the year. Again, this was Italy, and that was the way it worked. And I'm happy it worked that way. Number 4, getting the right books or articles for your students is important, of course. It focuses on what they need to learn. There are vocabulary and sample conversations to look at with your student. I prefer using a book, be it a lesson where we meet in person, which I don't like to do anymore, or a Skype type of lesson, which I prefer. Using audio or video materials are excellent as well. Be sure to go beyond and into materials to get the biggest bang for the buck for you and your student. More on tearing apart materials later. Have the student order the book either online or get it locally if available. Make sure it's the same edition. Otherwise, you'll open up a can of worms when the texts don't match. Number 5, during the lesson, try to keep your mouth shut. I don't know how else to say it. Let the student do the talking. You are not paid to lecture or talk more than the student. That's why I recommend you use something like the Natural English Method. I came up with this brilliant method to get this student to improve as quickly as possible. Because prior to that, my student kept making the same mistakes. I'd orally correct them, but a few minutes later, they'd say the same mistake again. It drove me insane. Why couldn't they just remember the correct usage? I had just told them. Then one night, I tried something different. I shut up, and I didn't interrupt my student. When he made a mistake, I let him make the mistake. I simply wrote it down. After an hour or so, I gave him the piece of paper that I had written on and asked him to take a look at it. I told him that everything on the paper was what he said, verbatim. He looked up in surprise after having read the first one and said, "I said that?" "Yes, you did, and now I want you to find the error and correct it." He did because it was a simple grammatical error. I told him to write the correct version of the sentence next to the bad one. As he was writing, I could tell something was happening. He was physically changing the way he thought about correct grammar. He did the rest and told me to use this method every time we had a lesson. And I did. It was so useful for all my students. I would actually use this method during interviews with the human resources manager. They all said this is exactly what their employees needed to improve their language skills. I got a 70% sign-up rate using this tactic. More on this later. So there you have it. 5 of the top benefits of teaching privately. Now go out there and make a difference. Brendan Hassan, Speak to Perfection.